when my daughter Sarah told me that my $80,000 wasn't good enough for her wedding. I smiled, nodded, and made one phone call. By the next morning, every penny was gone, transferred to someone who actually deserved it. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. The fluorescent lights in the bank lobby buzzed overhead as I sat across from Sarah and her fiancé, Brandon, the cashier's check heavy in my weathered hands. $80,000. Every overtime shift, every skipped meal, every birthday present I'd gone without for the past 5 years since Martha passed. All of it sitting there in black ink on cream-colored paper. "Dad," Sarah said, her voice carrying that particular tone she'd perfected since high school, the one that meant she was about to ask for something while simultaneously being embarrassed by my existence. "Brandon and I have been talking about the wedding budget." I looked at Brandon Ashford III, all pressed khakis and inherited confidence, his manicured hands folded carefully on the marble table. 26 years old, and had never worked a day that left calluses. I knew his type hell. I'd built offices for men like his father for 30 years. "We really appreciate what you're trying to do here, Mr. Mitchell," Brandon said, glancing at the check like it was an expired coupon. "But Sarah's told me about your situation. And honestly, my parents have already covered most of the wedding expenses." My situation. Like being a welder was a medical condition. Sarah shifted in her chair, her engagement ring catching the light. 3 carats of gilt, courtesy of the Ashford Family Trust Fund. What Brandon means is his family will want to know where this money came from. And when they find out that my father... She paused, searching for words that wouldn't shame her further. "That's your father, what, sweetheart?" I asked quietly. "That you weld pipes for a living?" The words tumbled out like an apology she owed Brandon instead of me. His mother specifically asked about our family's financial contributions. How do I explain that this money comes from what, Sarah? From manual labor. Her voice dropped to a whisper, as if she was confessing to a crime. I sat there for a moment, watching my daughter, the little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest while I read her stories, who'd bandaged my cuts with Hello Kitty Band-Aids, who'd once told her second-grade class that her daddy could build anything, look at me like I was something she'd stepped in. "I see," I said, folding the check carefully and sliding it back into my shirt pocket. "So this money isn't clean enough for your new family?" "Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be," Sarah said, her eyes darting to Brandon. "Maybe you could contribute to the honeymoon fund instead, something smaller, more appropriate." Appropriate. Like my love could be measured in appropriateness. Brandon leaned forward, his voice taking on that boardroom authority he'd inherited along with his trust fund. "Mr. Mitchell, I think what Sarah's trying to say is that we need you to understand your place in our new life together. The Ashford family has certain expectations, certain standards." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted, standing up slowly. My knees protested 30 years of crouching in crawl spaces and working overhead will do that to a man. But my voice was steady. "I understand that my daughter is ashamed of the hands that raised her." Sarah's face flushed. "Dad, it's not personal. It's just what, honey? It's just that the money I saved by working double shifts, by eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch for 5 years, by driving a truck with 200,000 miles on it, that money somehow carries the stench of honest work." The bank lobby went quiet around us. Even the tellers had stopped their clicking and shuffling to watch this small family drama unfold. "You know what?" I said, pulling out my phone. "You're absolutely right. This money should go to someone who won't be embarrassed by where it came from. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Emily. My younger daughter, 22 years old, and still proud to introduce me as her father. The one who'd never once asked me to park around the corner when dropping her off somewhere. "Dad, what are you doing?" Sarah's voice climbed an octave. "Hello, Em. It's your old man." "Yeah, I'm fine. Listen, remember that business plan you showed me last month? The design company you wanted to start?" I watched Sarah's face drain of color as understanding dawned. "Well, clear your schedule tomorrow morning. We're going to the bank." "Dad, wait." Sarah reached for my arm, but I was already walking toward the exit. "Mr. Mitchell," Brandon called out, that entitled edge creeping into his voice. "You can't just—" I turned back to face them both, these two beautiful young people who had everything except the wisdom to value what really mattered. "Sarah, sweetheart," I said, my voice carrying the weight of 26 years of bedtime stories, soccer games, and unconditional love. "You're right about one thing. You should be embarrassed. But not of me." I walked out of that bank into the crisp October afternoon, leaving behind a daughter who'd forgotten where she came from and a future son-in-law who'd never learned the value of getting there on your own. By tomorrow, Emily would have the capital to start her dream business. And Sarah would have exactly what she'd asked for, a wedding funded entirely by money she considered clean enough for her new family's standards. Sometimes the greatest gift a father can give is to stop giving to the child who stopped receiving with gratitude and start giving to the one who never forgot to say thank you. I drove home in my battle-scarred pickup truck, past the construction sites where I'd built my reputation, one weld at a time, past the neighborhoods where families like the Ashfords lived behind gates and assumptions. Emily was going to build something beautiful with that money, something she'd never be ashamed of. And Sarah, well, Sarah was about to learn that some bridges once burned don't rebuild themselves, just because you change your mind about the view from the other side. Chapter 2. 30 Years of Sacrifice. The drive home from the bank took me through the heart of Millfield, past the elementary school where I used to pick up two little girls every afternoon at 3:15. Sarah would run to the truck first. Back then, she couldn't wait to tell me about her day. Emily would follow, usually carrying some art project or a book she'd borrowed from the library, chattering about everything and nothing. I pulled into my driveway, the same cracked concrete I'd been meaning to fix for 3 years. 3 years since I started putting every spare dollar into that wedding fund, thinking I was building something beautiful for my daughter's future. The house looked smaller than it used to, like it had shrunk around the empty spaces Martha left behind. 5 years since cancer took her, and I still sometimes caught myself buying her favorite tea at the grocery store. Inside, I walked to the kitchen table where a manila folder sat thick with bank statements and receipts, the evidence of a father's love measured in dollars and overtime hours. I'd been avoiding this folder for months, but tonight felt like the right time to remember exactly what those $80,000 represented. It all started the November after Martha died. Martha had been gone for 2 months when the first overtime opportunity came up. Thanksgiving weekend, time and a half pay for emergency repairs on a downtown office building. Sarah was a senior in high school, Emily a freshman. The house felt like a museum of memories, too quiet without Martha's laughter filling the spaces between us. "Dad, you don't have to work on Thanksgiving," Emily had said, standing in the kitchen doorway, in her pajamas, her hair still messy from sleep. She was 14 and trying so hard to be the woman of the house. "It's just a few hours, sweetheart," I'd told her already, pulling on my work boots. "The overtime will help with Christmas presents." But it wasn't about Christmas presents. It was about the college applications scattered across Sarah's desk, each one requiring fees we couldn't afford. It was about Emily's art supplies that she never asked for, but I could see her eyeing at the store. It was about keeping their world stable when everything else had fallen apart. Sarah barely looked up from her breakfast that morning. She was 17 and angry at the world for taking her mother, angry at me for not being enough to fill the void Martha left behind. "Whatever," she'd muttered into her cereal bowl. "Emily and I will just heat up some frozen turkey dinners." I should have stayed home. I should have made them pancakes shaped like turkeys the way Martha used to. Instead, I spent Thanksgiving Day in a flooded basement welding pipes while my daughters ate Stuffer's meals in front of the television. That was the first day of what would become 5 years of choosing work over presents, over time, over family time. Always telling myself it was for them, that providing was the same thing as loving. 2 years later, when Sarah got into State University with a partial scholarship, I learned that partial was just another word for not enough. Sarah got into State University with a partial academic scholarship. Partial. The word that meant we still owed $22,000 a year for tuition, room, and board. I remember sitting at this same kitchen table, surrounded by financial aid documents and loan applications, trying to figure out how to make the numbers work on a welder's salary. Martha would have known what to do. She'd always been the one who managed our money, who made miracles happen with a calculator and sheer determination. Dad. Emily had appeared beside my chair, her sketchbook tucked under her arm. She was 16 then, all legs and artistic dreams. Maybe I could get a job after school, help out with Sarah's tuition. I'd pulled her onto my lap like I used to when she was small, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "That's not your job, Em. That's mine." "But you're working so much already. Yesterday you fell asleep standing up in the kitchen." She wasn't wrong. I'd been pulling 60-hour weeks, taking every job Hartley Construction would give me. My back ached constantly. My hands were permanently stained with welding burns, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd slept through the night without worrying about money. "Your sister deserves to go to college," I'd said. "And so do you when your time comes." "I know, Dad. But Mom always said..." Emily stopped biting her lip the way she did when she was trying not to cry. "What did Mom always say?" "She said the best gift we could give you was to be happy. And you don't look happy anymore." Out of the mouths of babes. But happiness was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not when Sarah needed textbooks, and Emily needed art supplies, and the mortgage needed paying, and the truck needed repairs, and life kept demanding more than I could give. That summer, I sold my Harley. The 1987 Sportster I'd bought myself for my 30th birthday back when Martha and I still believed we had forever to ride the back roads of Pennsylvania together. It broke my heart to watch some kid drive it away. But it paid for Sarah's first semester. Sarah never knew about the motorcycle, never asked where the money came from. But Emily noticed everything. "Dad, where's your bike?" she'd asked one evening, finding me staring at the empty space in the garage. "Sold it," I'd said simply. "But you loved that bike." "I love you and your sister more." She'd hug me, then fierce and tight the way Martha used to. "We love you too, Dad. We don't need you to give up everything for us." But I did need to, because that's what fathers do. We sacrifice so our children can soar, even when they never look back to see how far they've fallen to lift us up. By the time Sarah was a junior in college, the distance between us had grown wider than the miles separating Millfield from her campus. Sarah was a junior in college, majoring in business with a minor and looking down on her origins. She'd started dating Brandon that fall, and suddenly everything about home embarrassed her. "Dad, when you pick me up for Christmas break, could you maybe borrow Uncle Pete's car?" she'd asked during one of our weekly phone calls. "What's wrong with the truck? It's kind of old and loud, and my friends might see." The truck was 15 years old and had 180,000 miles on it because every dollar that might have gone toward a car payment went toward her tuition instead. But I didn't say that. I just drove the 2 hours to her campus in my embarrassing truck and loaded her designer luggage bought with money from my Christmas bonus into the bed. Emily, meanwhile, had gotten a job at the local coffee shop despite my protests. She insisted on contributing to the household saving every tip in a mason jar she kept on her dresser. "It's for college," she'd explained when I found the jar. "So you don't have to work so hard." You don't need to." "Yes, I do, Dad. I see what this is costing you. The way you wince when you get up in the morning. The pills you take for your back. The way you've stopped buying yourself anything that isn't absolutely necessary." She wasn't wrong. My work clothes were held together with patches and stubbornness. I hadn't bought myself new boots in 2 years. I ate lunch from a cooler because restaurant meals were too expensive, and I'd stopped getting my hair cut professionally, letting Emily trim it in the kitchen instead. But it was worth it. It was all worth it because I was building something for them. A future where they wouldn't have to choose between heating bills and groceries, where they could follow their dreams without the weight of financial worry dragging them down. Or so I thought. Now, sitting at that kitchen table with my folder of sacrifices, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. I'd been so busy trying to buy my daughters' futures that I'd forgotten to be present for their lives. Sarah had learned to see my love through dollar signs, to measure my worth by my ability to provide. When the providing became embarrassing, the love became inconvenient. But Emily had learned something different. She'd learned that love wasn't about the size of your bank account or the cleanliness of your money. She'd learned that dignity came from gratitude, not from pretending your blessings were anything other than gifts. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Emily, Dad, are you okay?" Sarah called me crying about something that happened at the bank. "Should I come over?" I typed back. "Come over, sweetheart. We need to talk about your future." Because suddenly I realized that all those years of sacrifice hadn't been wasted. They'd just been invested in the wrong daughter's wedding fund. Tomorrow, Emily and I would go to the bank. And for the first time in 5 years, I'd be spending money on someone who understood its true value, not what it could buy, but what it represented. 30 years of getting up before dawn, of missing school plays and soccer games, of choosing their dreams over my comfort. Sarah wanted clean money, fine. She could have Brandon's family's money, crisp new bills that carried no scent of honest work, no weight of sacrifice, no memory of love. Emily would get mine. Every beautiful, calloused, blood-stained dollar of it. And she'd build something with it that would make us both proud. Emily arrived 20 minutes after I texted her, bursting through the front door, with that worried expression she'd worn too often since Martha died. At 22, she looked so much like her mother it sometimes took my breath away. The same dark eyes that saw everything, the same way of tilting her head when she was trying to read my mood. "Dad, what happened?" Sarah was hysterical on the phone. Something about you embarrassing her at the bank. I gestured to the chair across from me, the same one where Martha used to sit every morning with her coffee and the crossword puzzle. "Sit down, sweetheart. We need to talk." Emily settled into the chair, her hands folded in her lap, the way Martha used to do when she was preparing for serious news. "Is everything okay? You look, I don't know, different." Different. That was one word for it. Liberated might be another. Your sister has decided that my money isn't good enough for her wedding, I said simply. So, I've decided to give it to someone who won't be ashamed of where it comes from. Emily's eyes widened. Dad, you can't be serious. That's your retirement money. That's everything you've saved since Mom died. And it's going to someone who deserves it. I reached across the table and took her hands, paint-stained from her latest art project, calloused from her job at the coffee shop. Working hands like mine. Tell me about that business plan you showed me. The design company. She pulled back slightly, shaking her head. Dad, no. I showed you that as a pipe dream. Something I might do someday when I have capital and experience, and what if you had the capital now? The silence stretched between us like a held breath. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Henderson next door calling for her cat. The ordinary sounds of a Tuesday evening in a neighborhood where people still knew each other's names. Dad, Emily said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. That's $80,000. I know exactly how much it is. I know because I earned every penny of it, $20 an hour, time and a half for overtime, double time for holidays. I know because I counted it every month when it went into that account, instead of fixing the roof or replacing the water heater or buying myself a decent pair of work boots. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I can't take your retirement money. It's not retirement money anymore. It's investment capital. There's a difference. She was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her hands. When she looked up, she had Martha's expression, the one that meant she was about to say something important. What did Sarah do exactly? So I told her, every word, every look, every moment of humiliation from that morning at the bank. I told her about Brandon's casual dismissal, about Sarah's whispered shame, about the phrase that would haunt me forever, manual labor. When I finished, Emily was crying openly. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry she said those things. Don't apologize for your sister's choices, sweetheart. But tell me this, are you ashamed of what I do for a living? Are you kidding me? Emily's voice rose with indignation. Dad, I'm proud of what you do. I'm proud that you built half this town with your own hands. I'm proud that when people see your welds, they know they'll hold for 50 years. I'm proud that you taught me that honest work is the most beautiful thing in the world. And there it was. The difference between my daughters crystallized in a single moment. One saw my calloused hands as an embarrassment to be hidden. The other saw them as a badge of honor to be celebrated. The next morning, Emily met me at First National at 9 o'clock sharp. She'd dressed professionally, a navy blazer I had never seen before, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She looked nervous but determined, clutching a leather portfolio that had seen better days. I brought the business plan, she said as we walked through the same doors, where yesterday my love had been deemed inadequate. Updated financials, market research, everything. The loan officer who helped us was a middle-aged woman named Carol Peterson. She'd known Martha from church, had sent a casserole after the funeral. She treated Emily with the respect Sarah had been denied by her own father. So you're looking to start a design company, Carol said, reviewing Emily's portfolio. Interior design, branding and graphic design primarily. Emily explained, her nervousness fading as she talked about her passion. But I want to focus on small businesses, family-owned companies. The places that big design firms overlook because they're not glamorous enough. I watched my daughter present her vision with confidence and clarity, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, pride that had nothing to do with sacrifice and everything to do with who she'd become. The numbers look solid, Carol said after reviewing the projections. $80,000 should give you a good foundation. Enough for equipment, software, office space, and operating expenses for the first year. Mr. Mitchell, she turned to me. This is a substantial gift. Are you sure about this decision? I thought about Sarah probably at that moment planning seating charts and selecting centerpieces with Brandon's mother spending money that came with no memory of the hands that earned it. Then I looked at Emily, ready to build something beautiful with my life's work. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I said. 30 minutes later, we walked out of that bank with Emily's business account established and funded. She stopped on the sidewalk and turned to face me, tears streaming down her cheeks. Dad, I promise you I'll pay back every penny. Em, listen to me. I put my hands on her shoulders, feeling the weight of this moment, understanding that I was changing both our lives with this decision. You don't owe me anything. You never have. You've given me something your sister forgot how to give a long time ago. What's that? Respect, gratitude, love that doesn't come with conditions or shame. I wiped a tear from her cheek. Your mother would be so proud of you right now. We drove separately from the bank, Emily, to give notice at the coffee shop, me to run errands I'd been putting off for months. For the first time in years, money wasn't the first thought that crossed my mind when I saw something I wanted or needed. I bought myself a decent lunch at Murphy's Deli instead of eating a peanut butter sandwich in the truck. I stopped at Sears and bought work boots that didn't have holes in the soles. Small things, but they felt revolutionary after years of self-denial. My phone rang as I was loading groceries into the truck. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. It rang again 10 minutes later. Then again. By the time I got home, I had 7 missed calls and 3 voicemails. I listened to them while Emily's future took shape in a bank computer somewhere in downtown Millfield. The first message was anger. Dad, what the hell do you think you're doing? Emily told me about the bank. That money was for my wedding. The second was bargaining. Look, I know I said some things I shouldn't have, but we can work this out. Brandon's family doesn't have to know where the money comes from originally. The third was desperation. Dad, please call me back. I need that money. I've already put deposits down on things. I've already told people what we're spending. Please. I deleted all 3 without calling back. That evening, Emily came over with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine she'd splurged on to celebrate. We sat at the kitchen table where I'd made the decision to change our lives, eating lo mein and talking about her plans. I want to call it blue-collar designs, she said, raising her wine glass. After you. After everyone like you who builds beautiful things with their hands. To blue-collar designs, I toasted. And to daughters who understand the value of honest work. As we clinked glasses, I realized something profound. I'd spent 5 years thinking I was investing in Sarah's future, but I'd actually been investing in Emily's character. Every time I'd worked overtime while Emily helped with dinner, every time I'd chosen sacrifice over comfort. While she watched and learned, I'd been teaching her lessons I never intended to teach. Sarah had learned that money was a tool to get what you wanted. Emily had learned that money was a responsibility that came with gratitude and respect. One daughter saw my work as something to hide. The other wanted to honor it with a company name. The choice of where to invest my life savings had never been clearer. My phone buzzed with another text from Sarah. I didn't read it. Whatever she had to say, I'd already heard everything I needed to hear in that bank lobby yesterday. Emily was telling me about her first potential client when I realized that for the first time in 5 years, I was thinking about the future. Instead of just surviving the present. Tomorrow, my younger daughter would start building something beautiful with the money I'd earned building things that last. And my older daughter would learn that some gifts once rejected don't come around again. Sarah didn't give up easily. I had to admire her persistence even if I couldn't stomach her motivation. Over the next 2 weeks, she tried everything: phone calls that I let go, to voicemail texts that I deleted without reading, even showing up at my job site on a Tuesday afternoon when she should have been in class. I was welding a support beam on the new community center when I saw her picking her way across the construction site in her designer heels, looking as out of place as an orchid in a junkyard. The other guys noticed too, 20 men in hard hats and work boots, stopping to watch this polished young woman navigate around concrete mixers and scaffolding. "Hey, Mitchell," called out Tommy Reeves, a kid barely older than Sarah, who'd been working construction since high school. "You got company." I finished my weld before acknowledging her, taking my time to do the job right. When you're building something that needs to last, you don't rush the details no matter who's waiting. "Hi, Dad." Sarah's voice was smaller than usual, competing with the sound of hammers and heavy machinery. She looked tired, older somehow, like the weight of her choices had begun to show on her face. "Sarah?" I lifted my welding mask and set down my torch. "This is a hard hat area. You shouldn't be here without safety equipment." I tried calling. "I know." I nodded toward the construction trailer that served as our temporary office. "Come on. We can talk inside." The trailer was quiet compared to the chaos outside, just the hum of a space heater and the distant sound of work being done by people who weren't ashamed of it. Sarah sat carefully on the edge of a folding chair as if she was afraid the construction site might contaminate her somehow. "Dad, I owe you an apology." I leaned against the desk, arms crossed, waiting. After 30 years of fatherhood, I'd learned that the words "after but" were usually more honest than the words before it. I was stressed about the wedding, and I said things I didn't mean. Brandon's family has very specific expectations, and I was trying to manage everyone's feelings, and I handled it badly. "Is that what you call it, handling it badly?" She looked down at her hands, at the engagement ring that cost more than I made in 3 months. "I never meant to hurt you." "But you did mean to hide me." The silence stretched between us, filled with the sound of men building something solid and permanent 50 feet away. "Dad, you have to understand the position I'm in. Brandon's mother comes from old money. His father sits on the boards of 3 different charities. They have expectations about the kind of family their son marries into." "And what kind of family is that?" Sarah jumped. "The kind that fits. The kind that belongs in their world." I pushed off from the desk and walked to the window, looking out at the construction site where good men were earning honest wages, building something that would serve this community for decades. Tommy Reeves was teaching a new kid how to tie rebar. Jim Patterson was measuring twice before cutting once the way his father had taught him. These were my people, my world, and my daughter was asking me to pretend they weren't good enough. "You know what I built last month?" I asked without turning around. "The new pediatric wing at County General." "You know what I'm building now? A community center where kids from families like ours will learn to swim, play basketball, maybe discover they're good at something nobody expected." I turned back to face her. "Every beam I weld, every joint I reinforce, it's going to be here long after I'm gone. Long after you're gone. That's what I do, Sarah. I build things that last." "I know that, Dad. I'm proud of what you do." "No, you're not. If you were proud, you wouldn't be asking me to hide it." Sarah's composure cracked slightly. "It's not about hiding it. It's about context. It's about understanding that different situations call for different approaches. Different approaches to who I am, to how I've spent my life." I sat down across from her, close enough to see the desperation she was trying to hide behind her practiced explanations. Sarah, I gave Emily that money because she's never once asked me to be different than I am. You gave Emily $80,000. Sarah's voice shot up an octave. Dad, that was supposed to be for my wedding. No, it was supposed to be for my daughter's future. Turns out I just had the wrong daughter in mind. The words hit her like a physical blow. She sat back in her chair, blinking rapidly, and for a moment I saw the little girl who used to wait for me to come home from work, who'd run to the door when she heard my truck in the driveway. You can't mean that. I mean every word of it. I leaned forward, my voice gentle but firm. Sarah, I love you. I will always love you. But I will not spend my life savings on someone who's ashamed of how I earned it. She started crying. Then not the careful tears that protected her makeup, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone watching their world collapse. Dad, I've already put deposits down. I've already told people what we're spending. Brandon's mother has made commitments based on our budget. Then you'd better figure out how to explain to Brandon's mother that your father's money comes with conditions she apparently can't accept. What conditions? I stood up and walked to the door of the trailer, opening it so the sounds of honest work could fill the space between us. The condition that you respect where it came from. The condition that you're grateful instead of embarrassed. The condition that you understand the difference between clean money and earned money. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her mascara. What do you want me to do? Tell Brandon's family that my father is a welder, that we don't have family money or trust funds or country club memberships. I want you to tell them that your father is a man who's worked every day for 30 years to give his daughters opportunities he never had. I want you to tell them that this money represents 30,000 hours of labor of getting up at 5 in the morning and coming home with aching bones and burns on my hands. I paused, looking at this young woman who'd grown so far from the child I'd raised. But mostly Sarah. I want you to be proud of that. And until you are, until you can look at my hands and see love instead of embarrassment, this conversation is over. She sat in that folding chair for a long time after I finished talking, crying quietly, while the sounds of construction continued outside. Finally, she stood up and walked to the door. This isn't over, Dad. Yes, it is. I watched her navigate back across the construction site, wobbling on her heels, looking like a tourist in the world that had built everything she'd ever taken for granted. Tommy Reeves tipped his hard hat as she passed, a gesture of respect she didn't acknowledge. When I got home that evening, Emily was in my kitchen making dinner. She'd been doing that more often since starting her business, claiming she needed to practice cooking since she'd be working late hours and wouldn't have time for restaurants. But I suspected she was worried about me eating alone in this empty house. How was your day? She asked, stirring something that smelled like heaven on the stove. Your sister came to see me at work. Emily's spoon stopped moving. Oh, how did that go? About as well as you'd expect. I sat down at the table, suddenly feeling every one of my 58 years. She wants me to apologize for being a welder. That's not really what she wants, Dad. I looked at Emily, surprised. What do you mean? She turned away from the stove, her expression thoughtful. Sarah's always been afraid ever since Mom died. Afraid of not being enough, of not fitting in, of people looking at our family and seeing what we don't have instead of what we do have. That doesn't excuse. I'm not excusing it, Emily interrupted gently. I'm just saying I understand it. She's marrying into a family that has everything we never had, and she's terrified they'll figure out she doesn't belong there. But she does belong there if that's what she wants. She's smart and beautiful and capable of anything she sets her mind to. We know that. But Sarah doesn't. She thinks she has to hide who she is to keep what she's gained. I thought about that while Emily finished cooking, while we ate her homemade pasta and talked about her first week as a business owner. 3 clients already, all small companies looking for someone who understood their values because she shared them. After dinner, as Emily was washing dishes in the sink where Martha used to stand, I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. My 2 daughters had learned different lessons from the same childhood. Emily had learned that love meant showing up, working hard, and being grateful for what you had. Sarah had learned that love meant providing, accumulating, and always reaching for something better. Neither lesson was wrong exactly, but only one of them honored the hands that had worked to teach it. Later that night, I called Pete, my brother, who lived 2 towns over. We talked for an hour about work and weather and the baseball season that was starting up. Normal things, easy things, the kind of conversation you have with someone who's never been ashamed of your calluses. "You did the right thing, Bobby," he said when I told him about the money. "Emily's got a good head on her shoulders. She'll make something beautiful with that investment." "I hope so. I know so. You raised her right. You raised them both right. Sarah's just got some growing up to do." After I hung up, I sat in my living room, looking at the framed photo of Martha on the mantel. In the picture, she was holding both girls, Sarah maybe 5 years old, Emily just a toddler. All of them laughing at something I'd said behind the camera. "I hope I did the right thing," I said to her image. But even as I said it, I knew I had. Some gifts have to be earned, not just with gratitude, but with respect for the hands that offer them. Emily had earned it. Sarah was still learning what earning meant. And somewhere in that difference lay everything I needed to know about which daughter understood the true value of an honest dollar. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday 3 weeks before the wedding. Cream-colored cardstock with raised gold lettering. The kind of formal elegance that probably cost more per square inch than I made in an hour. "Mr. and Mrs. Brandon Ashford III request the pleasure of your company," it began, but my name was nowhere to be found on the envelope. It was addressed simply to the Mitchell family. I suppose that was Sarah's compromise, acknowledge my existence without having to explain exactly who I was. Emily found me reading it at the kitchen table when she stopped by after work. She was still wearing her paint-splattered apron from her first official day at Blue Collar Designs, looking tired but satisfied in the way people do when they've spent the day building something they believe in. "Did you get one too?" she asked, pulling an identical invitation from her purse. Apparently I'm part of the Mitchell family now. Anonymous but invited. Emily sat down across from me, her expression troubled. "Dad, are you going to go?" I'd been asking myself that question for 3 weeks, ever since Sarah's last desperate phone call. She'd tried a different approach, that time tears instead of anger, appeals to fatherly duty instead of shame management. "I know I hurt you," she'd said, "but I'm still your daughter. This is still my wedding day." She wasn't wrong. Despite everything, despite the words that couldn't be taken back and the choices that couldn't be undone, she was still the little girl who'd fallen asleep on my chest reading bedtime stories. She was still the child I'd taught to ride a bike in the driveway where Martha's car used to sit. "I don't know," I told Emily honestly. "Part of me thinks I should go. Be the bigger person. Show up and smile and pretend her shame doesn't cut right through me. And the other part thinks I've spent enough years pretending to be smaller than I am." Emily reached across the table and took my hand, her fingers warm and steady. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you. But Dad, this is your choice, not hers, not Brandon's family's. Yours." The wedding was set for 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon at St. Catherine's, the same church where Martha and I had been married 28 years earlier. I'd walked past it twice that week, both times wondering if the building remembered the young couple who'd stood at that altar with nothing but love and hope and a determination to build something lasting together. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that makes you want to stay in bed with coffee and yesterday's newspaper. I'd planned to spend the day working on the water heater that had been making concerning noises for the past month, but when I woke up, I found myself thinking about white dresses and wedding vows and the father-daughter dance. I wouldn't be dancing. Emily called at 10 o'clock. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay. Working on some projects around the house." "Dad?" Her voice carried that gentle note that meant she could see right through me. "It's okay to admit this is hard." She was right, of course. It was hard. Harder than I'd expected. Not because I regretted my decision, but because loving someone doesn't stop just because they've disappointed you. The heart doesn't have an off switch for parental affection, no matter how much simpler life would be if it did. "I keep thinking about your mother," I admitted. "About how she'd want me to handle this." "What do you think she'd say?" I closed my eyes and tried to summon Martha's voice, her practical wisdom that had guided our family through every crisis and celebration. She'd say that love isn't about making things easy for people. It's about helping them become who they're supposed to be. And who is Sarah supposed to be? Someone who's proud of where she came from. Someone who understands that dignity isn't something you inherit. It's something you earn by honoring the people who sacrificed for you. At 11:30, my phone rang. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. And for a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail like all the others. But something made me answer. "Dad." Her voice was shaky on the edge of tears. "The flowers aren't right. The caterer is an hour late. Brandon's mother is having a meltdown about the seating arrangements, and I need you." It was the first time in years she'd said those words without following them with a request for money. "What do you need me to do, sweetheart?" "I need you to be my dad. Just for today. I need you to tell me everything's going to be okay, and that you love me even though I've been horrible to you." I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, looking out at the gray sky that matched my mood. "Sarah, I've never stopped loving you. Not for 1 second, but I can't pretend that what you said didn't hurt. I can't show up at your wedding and smile for the cameras while you're ashamed to introduce me to your new family." "I'm not ashamed of you," she whispered, but we both knew it wasn't entirely true. Maybe not of me as a person, but of me as a father, as the man who raised you, as the reason you can afford to marry into a family like the Ashfords. "Yes, sweetheart, you are." The silence stretched between us, filled with years of misunderstanding and months of hurt feelings. "Dad, I don't know how to fix this." "I do," I said quietly. "You start by deciding who you want to be. Sarah Mitchell, who's proud of her father's calloused hands and grateful for the opportunities his work provided. Or Mrs. Brandon Ashford III, who hopes nobody asks too many questions about where she came from. Can't I be both? Not until you figure out how to honor the first one instead of hiding her." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time thinking about choices and consequences, about love and pride, and the sometimes impossible distance between them. At 1 o'clock, I made my decision. I showered and put on my best suit, the navy blue one I'd worn to Martha's funeral and every important occasion since. I polished my shoes and combed my hair and looked at myself in the mirror, seeing a man who'd worked hard and loved deeply and had nothing to apologize for. But instead of driving to St. Catherine's, I drove to Riverside Cemetery. I sat on the stone bench beside Martha's grave, the one Emily and I had placed there 2 years ago when visiting became a regular part of our lives. The headstone was simple. Martha Elizabeth Mitchell, beloved wife and mother. She built love into everything she touched. "I know what you'd want me to do," I said to the gray granite and the name carved deep into stone. "You'd want me to go to that church and walk our daughter down the aisle and give her away to a man who doesn't understand what he's getting. You'd want me to be the bigger person." A light rain began to fall, the kind of gentle moisture that makes everything grow. But here's the thing, Martha. I've been the bigger person for 5 years. I've made myself smaller and smaller, working more and asking for less, giving everything and expecting nothing. And it didn't make Sarah love me more. It just made her respect me less. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the photos Emily had been sending me all week from her new office space. Pictures of her first logo designs, her business cards hot off the press, the small team of freelancers she had already begun assembling. Blue-collar designs was becoming something real, something beautiful, something that honored the hands that had made it possible. One daughter gets it, Martha. One daughter understands that love isn't about what you can provide. It's about being grateful for what's been provided. Emily's building something with our money, our values, our pride in honest work. I stood up and brushed the rain from my suit jacket, feeling lighter than I had in months. Sarah's getting married today, and I'm not there. But I'm not punishing her by staying away. I'm teaching her. I'm showing her that some bridges have to be rebuilt by the person who burned them down. The drive home took me past St. Catherine's. I could see the cars lined up outside, the photographer setting up his equipment, the florist carrying arrangements toward the entrance. Through the stained glass windows, I caught a glimpse of white silk and nervous movement. I didn't stop. Instead, I drove home to my empty house and changed back into my work clothes. I spent the afternoon fixing that water heater, the kind of honest repair work that keeps a house running that nobody notices until it's not done. Emily found me in the basement around 5 o'clock, covered in dust and satisfaction. "How did it go?" she asked gently. "I didn't go." She studied my face, looking for signs of regret or sadness. "How do you feel about that?" "Like I made the right choice for the right reasons." I wiped my hands on a shop rag and looked at my younger daughter, this young woman who had never once asked me to be anything other than who I was. "How was your afternoon?" "I went to the wedding." My heart stopped for a moment. How was it? Beautiful, expensive, everything Sarah dreamed it would be. Emily paused, choosing her words carefully. "She looked for you during the ceremony before she walked down the aisle. She kept looking toward the back of the church. And when she realized you weren't there, she cried. Not happy tears. The kind of tears that happen when you finally understand what you've lost." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, surrounded by the tools and equipment that had built our lives piece by piece, choice by choice. "Dad," Emily's voice was soft, "I think she's starting to figure it out." "Figure what out?" "That marrying up doesn't mean anything if you've forgotten what lifted you in the first place." That night I made myself a simple dinner and ate it at the kitchen table where so many important conversations had taken place. My phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. Probably one of Sarah's friends, maybe even Brandon, wondering where the father of the bride had disappeared to. I didn't read it. Some conversations happen in their own time, when both people are ready to hear what the other one needs to say. Sarah would call when she was ready to talk, instead of demand to listen, instead of justify to build bridges instead of burning them. Until then, I had Emily's business to support my own life to rebuild, and the quiet satisfaction that comes from making the hard choice instead of the easy one. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the evening sun was breaking through the clouds. Tomorrow would be a new day full of possibilities for people brave enough to face them honestly. I'd taught both my daughters that lesson in different ways. Only one of them had learned it. 18 months. That's how long it took for everything to change. 18 months for Emily's 3-person startup to become a 20-employee company with offices in 2 states. 18 months for Blue Collar Designs to land contracts with major corporations who discovered that authenticity was exactly what their brands had been missing. 18 months for my younger daughter to prove that sometimes the best investment isn't in who asks for help, but in who knows how to use it. I was reading the business section of the Tribune on a Thursday morning when I saw the headline, "Local design firm lands $1 million contract with Midwest Manufacturing." The photo showed Emily shaking hands with the CEO of Henderson Industries, both of them smiling in front of a conference room wall covered with Blue Collar Designs work. My coffee went cold as I read the article twice, then a third time, pride swelling in my chest like a physical thing. Mitchell started Blue Collar Designs 18 months ago. With a simple philosophy, the reporter had written. Authentic branding for companies that understand the value of honest work. We don't design for boardrooms, she explains. We design for break rooms and factory floors and small business owners who need their brand to reflect their values, not their budget. The article went on to detail Emily's client list. Family-owned restaurants, construction companies, manufacturing firms, auto repair shops. All the businesses that big design firms overlooked because they weren't glamorous enough, weren't profitable enough, weren't sophisticated enough for Madison Avenue sensibilities. Emily had found her niche by honoring mine. My phone rang as I was cutting out the article to add to the scrapbook I'd started keeping of Emily's success. Her name flashed on the screen, and I could hear the excitement in her voice before she even spoke. "Dad, did you see it? Did you see the Tribune?" "I'm looking at it right now, sweetheart. $1 million contract. That's incredible." "It's not just the money, Dad. It's what this means. Henderson Industries chose us over 3 New York firms because they said our work felt real. They said it honored their workers instead of trying to hide them." I thought about the irony of that while Emily bubbled over with details about the project. 18 months ago, Sarah had been ashamed of manual labor. Now Emily was building an empire by celebrating it. "There's something else," Emily continued. "Something I want to show you. Can you come to the office this afternoon?" Emily's office was in the renovated warehouse district downtown, the same area where I'd worked on construction projects for 15 years. The building had been a textile mill in the 1940s, back when Millfield was a manufacturing town instead of a bedroom community for people who worked in the city. Now it housed artists' studios, small businesses, and companies like Blue Collar Designs that understood the beauty of repurposed spaces. Emily met me in the lobby wearing a navy blue blazer that looked expensive but practical. Her hair pulled back in the kind of professional style that managed to look both serious and approachable. She'd grown into herself over these 18 months, developed the confidence that comes from building something with your own hands and watching it succeed. "Come on," she said, leading me toward the elevator. "I want to show you the new expansion." The elevator opened onto the 3rd floor, revealing a space I didn't recognize from my previous visits. What had once been Emily's cramped 4-person office was now a sprawling design studio with floor-to-ceiling windows, modern workstations, and walls covered with the kind of creative energy that happens when people love what they do. But it was the far wall that made me stop walking. A massive photograph dominated the space, my hands, weathered and scarred, holding a welding torch. The image was beautiful in its honesty, artistic in its composition, powerful in its simplicity. Below it in elegant lettering were the words, "Built to last, the Blue Collar Promise." "Emily," I whispered, staring at my own hands turned into art. I hired a photographer last month. She explained, her voice soft with emotion. I wanted something for the office that reminded everyone what we stand for, what we're honoring. Around the photograph were smaller images. A baker's flour-dusted apron, a mechanic's oil-stained coveralls, a carpenter's measuring tape. All of them beautiful, all of them dignified, all of them celebrating work that other people took for granted. Your hands built this company, Dad. Literally and figuratively. I wanted everyone who walks into this office to understand that. I couldn't speak for a moment, overwhelmed by the gesture and everything it represented. Emily had taken the shame Sarah felt about my work and transformed it into the foundation of a successful business. She'd taken the hands that Sarah wanted hidden and made them the centerpiece of her company's identity. Dad, Emily's voice carried a note of concern. Are you okay? I'm perfect. I managed my voice rough with emotion. This is perfect. She showed me around the rest of the office, introducing me to her employees as the man who made all this possible. Not as an investor or a silent partner, but as her father, the welder, whose values had shaped everything she built. A young graphic designer named Marcus shook my hand and said, Mr. Mitchell, Emily talks about you all the time, about how you taught her that beautiful work comes from caring about what you're building. A project manager named Jenny added, she says you taught her that it doesn't matter if other people understand what you do, as long as you do it with integrity. Walking through that office, hearing Emily's employees talk about the principles I'd tried to instill in my daughters, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The deep satisfaction that comes from knowing your life's work has meaning beyond the paycheck. That evening, Emily and I had dinner at Murphy's Deli, the same place where I'd bought myself lunch the day I walked out of Sarah's bank meeting. We sat in a corner booth, Emily's laptop open between us, as she showed me the Henderson Industries project plans. We're creating an entire brand identity around their manufacturing heritage. She explained, scrolling through design concepts that somehow made factory work look like art. Their great-grandfather started the company in 1952 with nothing but a lathe and a dream. Now, they want to honor that story instead of hiding it. Sounds familiar, I said. Emily looked up from her laptop, her expression serious. Dad, I need to ask you something. Are you proud of what I've built? Proud? I almost laughed at the understatement. I've never been prouder of anything in my life. Not of any building I've welded, not of any project I've completed. You took the money I gave you and turned it into something that honors every working person in this town. But it's more than that, she continued. I need you to know that this success isn't just because of the money. It's because of the values you taught me. The work ethic, the integrity, the understanding that respect is earned, not inherited. She closed the laptop and leaned forward, her expression intense. Dad, I've been offered 3 times what I paid for this company. Big firms from Chicago and New York who want to buy blue-collar designs and franchise the concept. They see the success we've had, and they want to replicate it in other markets. My heart skipped. Are you thinking about selling? I thought about it for about 5 minutes. Then I realized that what we've built here can't be replicated by people who don't understand it. You can't manufacture authenticity. You can't franchise integrity. She reached across the table and took my hand, her fingers tracing the scars and calluses that had become the symbol of her company. I'm not selling, Dad. I'm expanding, but on our terms. We're opening offices in Pittsburgh and Cleveland, but only with people who understand what we're really selling. Not just design services, but dignity. Not just branding, but belonging. That night, driving home through neighborhoods where porch lights illuminated the end of another working day, I thought about the strange mathematics of parental investment. I'd given both daughters the same love, the same opportunities, the same foundation. But only one had built something lasting with what she'd received. Emily had turned $80,000 into a multi-million-dollar company. But more than that, she'd turned a father's values into a business philosophy that was changing how people thought about honest work. Sarah, meanwhile, was living in a house I'd helped buy, married to a man whose family still didn't know the true source of their down payment, probably still explaining away her father's occupation at dinner parties. The difference wasn't in what I'd given them. The difference was in what they'd chosen to do with the gift. My phone buzzed with a text message as I pulled into my driveway. For a moment, I thought it might be Sarah finally ready to have the conversation we'd been avoiding for 18 months. But it was Emily. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Thank you for teaching me that the most beautiful things are built by people who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty. I love you, Dad. I sat in my truck for a long time reading those words, thinking about legacy and love, and the mysterious alchemy that turns a father's sacrifice into a daughter's success. Tomorrow, Emily would go back to her office with my photograph on the wall, building a company that celebrated everything Sarah had been ashamed of. And somewhere across town, Sarah would wake up in her beautiful house, still trying to figure out how to reconcile who she was with who she'd married. One daughter had learned to honor her father's hands by building something beautiful with her own. The other was still learning that some foundations can't be hidden, only celebrated or abandoned. I finally understood which lesson was more valuable than money could ever measure. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in October, exactly 2 years after that disastrous meeting at the bank. I was reading Emily's latest business profile in Forbes magazine, How Blue-Collar Designs is Redefining Corporate America's Relationship with Authentic Branding, when Sarah's name flashed on my screen. I hadn't heard from her since the wedding day I didn't attend. 24 months of silence, broken only by the occasional second-hand updates Emily would share when she thought I needed to know. Sarah had moved to Brandon's family estate in Connecticut. Sarah was working part-time at an art gallery. Sarah seemed happy, distant, living a life that required no calloused hands or construction sites, or fathers who reminded her where she'd come from. I let it ring 3 times before answering, steeling myself for whatever version of my daughter would be on the other end. Dad. Her voice was smaller than I remembered, fragile in a way that made my chest tighten with instinctive worry. Are you there? I'm here, Sarah. A long pause filled with the sound of her breathing and what might have been traffic in the background. I need to talk to you. I think I need help. The words every parent dreads and hopes for simultaneously. Dreads because they signal that your child is in trouble. Hopes for because they mean your child still believes you might be able to fix it. What's wrong, sweetheart? Everything. The word came out like a sob. Everything's wrong, and I don't know how to fix it, and I think I've made the biggest mistake of my life. I set down the magazine with Emily's success story and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the October morning where leaves were turning the colors of change and endings. Where are you? I'm outside your house, in my car. I've been sitting here for 20 minutes trying to work up the courage to knock on your door. I looked toward the street and saw it a silver BMW I didn't recognize, probably worth more than I made in 6 months, sitting at the curb with a lone figure hunched over the steering wheel. Come inside, Sarah. Whatever's wrong, we'll figure it out. The woman who walked through my front door looked like Sarah, but felt like a stranger. She'd lost weight, her cheekbones sharp in a way that suggested stress rather than intention. Her clothes were expensive, but somehow diminished on her frame, as if even her designer wardrobe couldn't quite fit the person she'd become. Most shocking of all were her hands. No wedding ring. Coffee. I offered, falling back on the domestic rituals that had carried us through difficult conversations when she was younger. She nodded and sat at the kitchen table where we'd shared 1,000 meals, where I'd helped her with homework, where I'd listened to her dreams about the future she was going to build. Now she sat there like a refugee from her own life, clutching a tissue and trying to find words for whatever had brought her back to the place she'd tried so hard to leave behind. I made coffee the way Martha used to, taking my time with the ritual, giving Sarah space to collect herself. When I set the mug in front of her, she wrapped both hands around it like it was an anchor. "Brandon left me," she said without preamble. 3 months ago. Filed for divorce and moved in with his secretary. Turns out the Ashford family values don't include fidelity, just the appearance of it. I sat down across from her, the same seats where we'd had our last real conversation 2 years ago. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know this isn't what you wanted." "That's not the worst part." Sarah's laugh was bitter hollow. "The worst part is that his family is destroying me in the divorce. They're claiming that I was never the right fit, that I married above my station, that I should be grateful for whatever settlement they're willing to offer." She took a shaky sip of coffee, her hands trembling slightly. "They're saying I'm a gold digger who trapped their son. They're using my background, our background, against me. Saying I never belonged in their world anyway." The irony was so sharp it could have cut glass. The very thing Sarah had been ashamed of, her working-class roots, her father's manual labor, was now being weaponized against her by the people she'd tried so hard to impress. "What did you tell them?" "I told them the truth, that my father worked his whole life to give me opportunities, that our family had values they wouldn't understand." Her voice cracked. "And they laughed. They actually laughed and said that explained everything." I reached across the table and covered her hands with mine, feeling how thin she'd become, how fragile. "Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You do belong. You belong in any world you choose to inhabit, not because of who you married or what you can afford, but because of who you are." "But I'm not anybody, Dad. I don't have a career like Emily. I don't have skills or accomplishments. I was a wife, and now I'm not even that. You're my daughter. You're Martha's daughter. You're someone who was raised with love and values and the understanding that dignity comes from character, not bank accounts." She was crying openly now, the careful composure of the past 2 years finally cracking completely. "I threw it all away, didn't I? I threw away my family for people who never really wanted me anyway." I moved my chair around the table so I could put my arms around her. This broken young woman who'd traveled so far from home only to discover that home was what she'd needed all along. "You didn't throw anything away, sweetheart. You just lost your way for a while. People do that sometimes. But you warned me at the bank when I said those horrible things about your money not being clean enough. You tried to tell me what really mattered, and I wouldn't listen. You weren't ready to listen then. Maybe you are now." We sat like that for a long time, father and daughter holding each other in the kitchen where she'd grown up, where Martha had taught her to make pancakes and I'd helped her practice spelling words. The same kitchen where I'd made the decision to invest in Emily's future instead of Sarah's wedding setting in motion. The chain of events that had led us to this moment. "Dad," Sarah said, finally pulling back to look at me. "I saw Emily's article in Forbes. I saw what she's built with the money you gave her. She's done incredible things. She built something beautiful while I was building something fake. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I was so jealous when you gave her that money. I thought you loved her more than me. I've never loved either of you more than the other. But I needed to invest in the daughter who would honor what the investment represented. And now, I looked at this woman who'd come full circle, who'd learned the hard way that authentic love was worth more than inherited status. That family was the foundation everything else was built on. Now I'm looking at someone who might finally understand what that investment really meant. Sarah stayed for dinner, helped me cook spaghetti the way Martha used to make it, with too much garlic and not enough sophistication for Connecticut dinner parties. We talked about Emily's business, about the employees who called her office a place where honest work was celebrated instead of hidden. I want to see her, Sarah said as we were cleaning dishes. I want to apologize to Emily for disappearing from her life just because I was embarrassed by mine. That's between you and your sister. But Sarah, if you're going to rebuild relationships with us, you need to understand something. She looked at me expectantly. You can't go backward. You can't pretend the past 2 years didn't happen, or that the things you said didn't hurt. You can only go forward, and only if you're willing to do it as the person you really are, instead of the person you thought you should be. After Sarah left that evening, promising to call Emily and arrange a meeting, I sat in my living room thinking about the strange circles life makes. How sometimes the longest way around is the only way home. My phone rang just after 9 o'clock. Emily's name on the screen. Dad, Sarah called me. She wants to have lunch tomorrow. How do you feel about that? Honestly, I'm nervous. I've missed her, but I'm also angry about the way she cut us out of her life. The way she treated you. Give her a chance, Em. People can change when they finally understand what they've lost. Did she really lose everything? I thought about that question, about what it means to lose everything and what it means to find what really matters. She lost the things she thought she wanted. Now, maybe she can find the things she actually needs. The next morning, I drove past Emily's office building and saw 2 women sitting in the coffee shop across the street. Sarah and Emily facing each other, across a small table, both of them crying, both of them talking, both of them rebuilding something that had been broken by pride and fixed by humility. Through the window, I watched my daughters remember how to be sisters, how to forgive, how to start over with the foundation they'd always shared. But one of them had forgotten how to see. I didn't stop. This wasn't my conversation to have, or my forgiveness to grant. This was between 2 young women who'd learned different lessons from the same childhood, and now had to decide how those lessons would shape their future relationship. But as I drove away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 2 years. Hope that both my daughters might finally understand that the most valuable inheritance isn't money or status or the ability to fit into worlds that don't want you. It's the knowledge that you're loved for who you are, not who you pretend to be. And sometimes that knowledge is worth losing everything else to find. 3 months later, I was installing a new dishwasher in my kitchen when I heard 2 familiar voices on my front porch laughing the way sisters do when they're sharing a joke that only they understand. Emily and Sarah arriving together for our first family dinner in almost 3 years. Through the window, I watched them navigate my front steps. Emily carrying what looked like homemade dessert, Sarah balancing a bottle of wine and a manila folder thick with papers. They moved with the easy synchronization of people who'd remembered how to be comfortable around each other, how to fill the spaces that time and pride had carved between them. "Dad," Emily called as they came through the door. "Something smells incredible in here." "Pot roast," I said, emerging from the kitchen with my hands still damp from testing the dishwasher connections. "The way your mother used to make it." Sarah stopped in the doorway, her eyes taking in the house she'd grown up in, but hadn't really seen in years. It looked different than it had during her childhood. Newer appliances that I could finally afford, fresh paint on walls that had waited too long for attention. Small improvements that came from having money for something other than other people's dreams. "You've made changes," she said softly. "A few. Turns out when you're not supporting someone else's lifestyle, you can actually maintain your own." The words came out sharper than I'd intended, carrying an edge of the hurt that 2 years hadn't completely erased. Sarah flinched slightly, but didn't look away. "I deserved that," she said. "I deserved a lot worse than that." Emily set her dessert on the kitchen counter and turned to look at both of us, her expression gentle but firm. "We talked about this. No more guilt, no more punishment. We're here to build something new, not to keep tearing down what's already broken." Over the past 3 months, my daughters had been rebuilding their relationship, one careful conversation at a time. Emily had hired Sarah to work part-time at Blue Collar Designs, not out of charity, but because Sarah had discovered she had a talent for client relations, for talking to small business owners who felt intimidated by design firms and helping them understand that their stories mattered. It turned out that learning to appreciate honest work was easier when you'd lost everything that came from looking down on it. "Actually," Sarah said, setting down the wine and opening her folder, "I have something to show you both. Something I've been working on." She spread papers across my kitchen table, business registration documents, a bank account statement, marketing materials, for something called Second Chapter Consulting. "I'm starting my own business," she announced, her voice carrying a confidence I hadn't heard in years. "Helping people navigate major life transitions, divorce, career changes, financial setbacks. All the things I've learned the hard way." Emily leaned over the documents, reading with the quick attention of someone who understood business plans. "Sarah, this looks incredible. Turning your worst mistakes into your greatest strengths. I love that tagline." "Emily helped me with the branding," Sarah admitted. "But the concept is all mine. Turns out there are a lot of people who need to learn what I learned about starting over with integrity instead of pretense." I studied the woman sitting at my table, this daughter who'd traveled so far from home, only to discover that coming back was the beginning of her real journey. The past 3 months had changed her in ways that went deeper than weight gain or better sleep. She carried herself differently now, with the quiet dignity that comes from earning respect instead of expecting it. "Where did you get the startup capital?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "I sold everything I said," she said simply. "The jewelry Brandon gave me, the designer clothes, the car. Everything that represented who I thought I was supposed to be. Turns out it was enough to fund who I actually want to become." She pulled out a check from the folder and placed it in front of me. $80,000 made out in my name. "Sarah, no," I said immediately. "That's your business money. Some of it is, but this is different." She met my eyes with steady resolve. "Dad, I can't give you back the years I wasted being ashamed of you. I can't undo the things I said or the pain I caused. But I can give you back the money you tried to give me, the money I said wasn't clean enough." I stared at the check, seeing not just numbers, but the weight of understanding behind them. "This is every dollar you offered me for my wedding. I've been calculating it for months, figuring out exactly what I refused. I want you to have it back, not because I'm trying to buy forgiveness, but because I finally understand what it represented." What did it represent? "Love," she said simply. 30 years of getting up before dawn and working overtime and putting your daughter's dreams ahead of your own comfort. 30 years of building something that would last long after you were gone. Emily was crying quietly, watching her sister articulate lessons it had taken heartbreak to learn. "I don't want your money, Sarah," I said gently. I want something more valuable than that. What? I want you to understand that the most important inheritance I can give you has nothing to do with bank accounts. It's the knowledge that work has dignity, that family comes first, and that being grateful for what you have is more valuable than always reaching for what you think you need. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand that now. But Dad, please take the money. Not as repayment, but as proof that I finally know what it's worth. I looked at this check representing everything I'd tried to give her 2 years ago. Everything she'd rejected because it carried the scent of manual labor and sacrifice. Now she was offering it back, not from shame, but from understanding, not as rejection, but as recognition. What do you want me to do with it? Whatever you want. Fix up the house. Take a vacation. Buy yourself something nice for once, or... She glanced at Emily, who nodded encouragingly. Give it to someone who needs it. Someone who understands what it represents. That evening, after Sarah and Emily had gone home to their respective lives, Sarah to her modest apartment where she was building something real. Emily to her beautiful loft, where success hadn't changed her values. I sat in my living room, looking at the check and thinking about cycles of giving and receiving, about money and meaning, and the strange mathematics of family love. The next morning, I drove to the community center I'd helped build 3 years ago, the one where kids from working families learn to swim and play basketball and discover talents nobody expected. I found the director in her office, surrounded by grant applications and fundraising letters. Mr. Mitchell, she said, looking up with surprise. What brings you here? I placed Sarah's check on her desk. I'd like to make a donation for a scholarship fund for kids whose parents work with their hands and dream with their hearts. This is incredibly generous. What would you like the fund to be called? I thought about Martha, who'd taught our daughters that love was something you built into everything you touched. About Emily, who'd turned investment into enterprise and shame into celebration. About Sarah, who'd learned that the longest way around was sometimes the only way home. The Martha Mitchell Memorial Scholarship Fund, I said, for kids who understand that where you come from is less important than where you're going, but that you should never forget the hands that helped you get there. 6 months later, I was sitting in the same community center gym watching the first recipients of the scholarship fund play basketball with kids whose parents could afford all the extras. You couldn't tell which was which by watching them play, by listening to them laugh, by seeing how they celebrated each other's successes. Emily and Sarah sat beside me in the bleachers, both of them cheering for children they'd never met, but whose dreams they'd helped fund. Emily's business was expanding to its 4th city, still celebrating honest work and authentic values. Sarah's consulting practice was thriving, built on the foundation of helping people rebuild with integrity instead of pretense. Dad, Sarah said during halftime, I need to tell you something. I braced myself, still not entirely comfortable with serious conversations from the daughter who'd once broken my heart. I'm pregnant. The words hit me like a physical blow, but a good one, the kind that knocks the air out of you with joy instead of pain. Sarah, that's wonderful. Who's the father? His name is David. He's a teacher at the elementary school where I volunteer. He's nothing like Brandon. He knows exactly who I am and where I come from, and he loves me for it, not despite it. Emily squeezed her sister's hand, grinning with the kind of happiness that comes from watching someone you love finally find what they've been looking for. When? I asked. June, a summer baby. Sarah's smile was radiant, uncomplicated by shame or fear or the need to hide anything from anyone. I want you to walk me down the aisle this time, Dad. at a real wedding with people who actually want to be there. I looked at my daughters, these two women who'd taken such different paths to understanding what really mattered, and felt something I hadn't experienced since Martha died, complete contentment with the way life had unfolded. "I'd be honored," I said. That night, I called Pete to tell him he was going to be a great uncle again. We talked about the strange ways life comes full circle, how sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what you actually need. How the best investments are the ones that pay dividends in character instead of cash. After I hung up, I walked to my backyard where the evening air still carried the scent of autumn leaves and possibility. Above me, stars were emerging in a clear sky. The same stars that had watched over this neighborhood for decades, that had seen families grow and change and learn what love really meant. I thought about Martha, about how she'd be proud of the women our daughters had become. How she'd love the idea of a grandchild who would grow up understanding that dignity came from gratitude. That work was beautiful when it was done with love. That family was the foundation everything else was built on. Tomorrow, I'd go back to my job welding buildings that would last long after I was gone. Emily would continue expanding her business, celebrating the hands that built America one authentic brand at a time. Sarah would help more people learn that starting over with integrity was better than continuing with pretense. And somewhere in the future, a child would grow up knowing that their grandfather was a welder, and that was something to be proud of. The circle was complete, but the story was just beginning. Some investments take years to mature, but when they do, the returns are measured in generations, not dollars. I'd finally learned the difference between giving money and building legacy. And both my daughters had learned that the most valuable inheritance isn't what you receive, but what you do with the love that gives it meaning. Thank you for joining us for this story of family forgiveness and the true meaning of wealth. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and share your own experiences of family and redemption in the comments below. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give our children is the courage to let them find their own way home.